Did I together. I'm glad we got another chance to learn together. And we really need to put all our kavanas tonight for the refuah shlema of our friend Michal Golom. Really have to lift it up a few notches. Michal Moshe Ze'ev ben Yehudit. Michal Moshe Ze'ev ben Yehudit. That he should really feel how much love we have for him. That'll give him the most chizuk, most koach in the world. When he first got sick, so all these friends were calling him, he couldn't, he told me, he's like, I don't understand. I never knew how much people loved me, and it was giving him so much koach by just finding out and tuning into how much people love him. So you don't ever underestimate that feeling that you have for someone. Express it. You never know when they need it. You never know when they need it. And right now he needs it. So, for the refuah shlema Michal Moshe Ze'ev ben Yehudit, and we continue davening also for the refuah shlema of Natan Daniel ben Malka. I'm sorry? Leah Batsara. So, we have a shir tonight. We have a really good one. We have a really good one.
Really?
No, really good one. Tonight's shir is it's one of those, like it's nothing to do with anything but being open to hearing what Rabbi Shlomo has to say on this parsha, which is the parsha of the Ten Commandments. And bichlal, this week always when we crossed the Red Sea, but we ended off the Torah reading, learning about Amalek, and yet we know that we have something big coming up this Shabbos, which is called receiving the Torah. There's so much potential in the air this week. I always sense it. The week between Yitro, between Beshalach and Yitro, there's so much potential in the air. And that's why when there's so much potential, it's so easy to also skip over things that you weren't sure how important they really were. So we have always so much to get into, so much to connect to. And in Parashat Yitro, I always get overwhelmed. Because Aserta Dibrot, it's the Ten Commandments. How do you know what to focus on? There's so much. There's so much to learn about this Shabbos. Mazel Tov, Holy Chasam. Holy Kala? Kala's here? Kala's here. So, Hashem should just have, we should be very, very, very clear that whatever we're going to be touching upon is just a little tiny bit of what this parsha is really all about. So before we go into the text, I want to share with you a statement that I've heard many times from friends of mine that grew up Jewish, grew up religious, that when they hear about a convert, they're just amazed, saying, I would never convert if I wasn't Jewish, right? Meaning, if I didn't grow up Jewish, there's no way I would convert. I would take that on. Not a chance in the world, right? It's always you never hear a non-Jew say, I would never convert. It's only a Jew says, I would never convert to Judaism, right? And this parsha, there's a teaching in the Meshleach on this parsha that the famous question, why is the parsha where we receive our internal life support medicine called the Torah, why is it named after a ger? Why is it named, we have so many names, beautiful names. This parsha could have been named Moshe. It would have been a beautiful name. Look, we have Pinchas, we have Noach, we have Korach too, but Balak, pretty weird, but we have names of parshas of other people that are Gevalt. Really Gevalt. That must mean, the Meshleach says, that the inyan of conversion, of converting, and testing yourself to see whether you be willing to convert is almost an essential prerequisite for receiving the Torah. That's how the Meshilach brings it down in Yitro. Would you convert today? How much would you give to convert today, to be part of a people that witness such what's called Talmud Torah? So whenever I hear my friends say, man, I'd never in a million years convert, so I always get freaked out. I don't want to hang out with them too much around this Parashat Yitro, because this is what it's all about, this Parsha. However, tonight we're going to be talking about another form of conversion, and we'll see it inside the text. Now, Yitro comes from Yitro had many names, right? The Rashi tells us he had many names. Reuel, Yeter, Chovav, Yitro, there's a bunch of names, right? And one of the names, what does Yitro mean? What does that mean? Add, more, right? Yoter, Yeter. Yitro is adding on something. He's Pashat adding on something to our existence as a people through the manner in which he conducts himself in the beginning of our Parsha, and really as long as he hangs out in our Torah. He's a fascinating character, Yitro. It's such a weird thing that someone that Mamish did so much avodah zara in his life shows us what tshuva is all about. Him being the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu, the role that he plays in the beginning of this parsha is tremendous. Chazal teach us that the laws of judges, the Sanhedrin, was all based on Yitro's initiative. When Yitro comes up to Moshe Rabbeinu in our parsha and says, you can't judge the people the way you're doing it right now. Remember, according to the Rambam, how many Jews were with us there in the desert? What's that? 3 million Jews. There were 600,000 Jews between the ages of 20 and 60. But when you map that, when you calculate that out, Rambam says about 3 million Jews. And who's judging them? Moshe Rabbeinu. Yitro coming in and changing it and saying, it doesn't work like this, it can't work like this, and it's much deeper than just the pshat. So Chazal teaches the way that the whole judicial system, we owe to Yitro. Meaning he's putting us in place for dorei dorot, for generations and generations to come, when it has to do with how we conduct ourselves with the law. But Yitro is doing something much, much deeper. In a text that we did 3 or 4 years ago, there's some things in here that we touched upon 3 or 4 years ago. However, there's maybe only 4 or 5 people in the room, and not that. Actually, there are a few of you online as well. Such a beautiful chaver here online. Hey guys. We touched upon some of this a few years ago, but I found in this incredible teaching that Rabbi Shlomo was doing with Leah Golom in the Karlach Shul in 1991, I found something dynamite, and I'm really excited about it. So that's what I wanted to do tonight. This is a really that's a hand point. This is a really important piece. This is going to be this is going to push us, but that's what we're here for.
I don't think so.
All right.
What year did you say you said this?
Okay, so it's 3 different pieces, and one of the pieces here is February 1991. I think February 1991. I'll check inside. Alrighty? Okay. Look inside here. Rabbi Shlomo says like this. There are people in the world who never change. You can show them they're wrong, but they just don't care. There are those who can see the greatest tragedy in the world and not become 1 ounce deeper. God can show them the greatest joy in the world and nothing about their essence is touched or changed. Then there are people, whatever happens to them touches them so deep. They become different people. I don't mean that you can't recognize them, but something happened to them inside. Now, this is a very straightforward paragraph that I'm sure that you could already go into your calculation of who you know in your life, who you're connected to, and begin to start to think about, is this person touched by life? Like, does this person change? Or you could tell them anything in the world. You could shake them up with the most horrific news or the greatest news, but in the morning they'll wake up like the same bagel and lox that they were every single morning. Then you have people that every single time they come in contact with another person, something's changing inside, something's becoming deeper and deeper. Like I always tell you guys, I've said this so many times when Rabbi Shlomo was with Bob Dylan in that Farbrengen, in the famous Farbrengen in the early 80s in Santa Monica, when Rabbi Shlomo was asked, what's your greatest dream? Remember? What's your greatest dream? Rabbi Shlomo said, my greatest dream is to meet and greet and say hello and be touched by every person in the world. And Dylan right away said, that's my greatest nightmare, Rabbi. Right? So for some people, being touched by being like you can't move them. You can't move them. This is how things have to be. Nochpo or no nochpo. I can't move around. It's my comfort zone. And mitzidi sheipol kol haolam. Everything can either explode or everything can Mashiach can come. I just got to make sure that I still have what's going for me and how I know how to deal with life. Because losing my comfort zone is such a danger, even though it could be the worst situation in the world. Like, I have first cousins that live in Buenos Aires, and it's not Parshat there at all. It's never Parshat. And whenever someone would ask me, why do they still, how come they never left? It's like, at a certain point, what you're accustomed to, en ma lasot. That's the best. That's what you think is the best situation for you. But being changed. We're going to talk tonight about this concept. We talked about it last week, and we're going to go further deeper in this as well. Because this is the Parsha of change. You think last week was the Parsha of change with Kriyas Yamsuf, with the water changing to dry land? There's something even deeper in this Parsha. And it gets amazing. Okay? Sorry, tonight I'm excited. Rashi says that after Yisro heard of the crossing of the Red Sea and about the war with Amalek, right? That's the first two words of the Parsha is what? By Yishma Yisro. Yisro heard. He decided he has to come and be with his son-in-law, Moshe. And what was it that touched him so deep? Now here Rabbi Shlomo is going into the psyche of Moshe Rabbeinu's father. This is absolutely brilliant. This is brilliant. I wish the whole world learned Parashat Yitro like this. And they will. Yisro heard that there are two kinds of people in the world. Do you know why the water changed for us Jewish people when we crossed the Red Sea? This is what we learned last week and in previous year. Because we changed. When the water saw that, sorry about this typo, that there's a whole nation of people who are changing their heart and their souls before God every second, the water said, I'm changing with you. What do you need me to be right now? And last week in our shir, we described what was that change that took place in Am Yisrael when they were standing by the water. They realized that in order to be saved right now, at that moment, when they got nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, they realized that as much as they davened and did good things and grew or didn't grow, whatever it was, it obviously wasn't enough to save them from what they were going through right now. So they changed their version of their potential, and they said, God, I promise you that I'm taking upon myself right now something that I never took on myself before, because I never believed I could reach it. I still don't know if I can reach it, whatever that something is, whatever that growth is, but I'm still taking it upon myself. The sea sees a people that they're big dreamers even for themselves, and said we could change as well. We could mamish change as well. So that's the first thing Rashi says Yitro heard. What did he hear? He heard about Kriyat Yamsuf. Not that he heard that the water split. He heard, who did the water split for? He heard the water split for a people who were in a constant mode of change from the moment they stood by the waters. He heard about a people that a second before were slaves for 210 years, to completely psychologically and physically enslaved, and yet what? A few minutes later, after leaving that space, free enough to dream big, like we talked about last week. That's the first thing Yitro hears about. What's the second thing in Rashi Yitro hears about? Milchemet Amalek, the war of Amalek. Then Yisro heard about Amalek. Amalek always hated us Jewish people. Amalek was the one who gave Paro the idea to make slaves out of the Jews. Did you know this? You know that Paro had 4 yoatzim, 4 advisors. And I think that Yitro was actually one of them as well. And I actually think that Bilam was too.
Right, he was.
Right? Bilam, Yitro, Amalek, and Eov. That's right. I'm almost certain. So who gave Paro the Eitzah to Bichlal throw Yidden into slavery? That was Amalek. After all the Rabbi Shlomo says, but after all the miracles are happening to the Jews, and you see there's one God, you still don't change? Amalek doesn't change. Now, let's just put things where they're at on the table right now. How could it be that we are a small, tiny people in the world that came back home after 2,000 years, and the world still didn't really change towards us, or towards the concept of God? How could that be? That is Amalek. That's where Amalek comes from. Doesn't matter. It has no relevance. It's all an incredible mikra, a coincidence. It has nothing to do with your life, the fact that all this happened and all these miracles. Nothing. Yitro hears about Am Yisrael changing, and he hears about people that could care less about change. That's what Rabbi Shlomo says that he was hearing. Those are the 2 things he heard about. So you know what it is, next paragraph? Yisrael realized, I got to get close to the people who always change. To the people who are actually touched by what God is doing in the world. Let's think about that. What other nation is actually touched and changes and I guess it like rebirths itself and keep, like, because we're learning a lot of Rav Kook. These days Rav Kook keeps on talking about Chiyat HaUmah, the rebirthing of the nation. What other nation goes through this rebirthing? What other nation as a whole is absolutely consumed by being touched by something that happened to them as a people? And I'm not trying to belittle the world, I'm asking you, as someone that's not so familiar with world history, what other nation has truly changed and been touched? And when you look at them and say, like, wow, what they went through as a people, look at them, look how they were able to change. Is there? Not so much, huh? As a people.
Well, like Soviet countries were reborn. It's all
They tried,
national.
but they're going right
Right,
back.
exactly.
They did
So
attempt.
that's they haven't been changed. There's been rebirth, I think, but not so much change.
Right. That's true. That's true. Here, look, and Rabbi Shlomo says this. This is such powerful words, it gives me the shivers. There are a lot of people who, even after they killed 6 million, they didn't change.
It's pretty scary.
Sure is. God gave us back the Holy Land. They didn't change. And then there are some people that whatever happens from God, mamish reaches them. They change. They wake up and become deeper. Our young people today are ready to change before God every second. When they see just a little sign from above, they're willing to do anything for God. Now, obviously, he's talking obviously about, the flower children. It's like the flower section tonight, obviously there's a lot of, he's talking about that very much as well, right?
Me too.
But he's saying about Bichlal, the youth of today, is that you don't find that cynicism and sarcasm amongst youth. You find it really in older people that say change is somehow. I'm going to change now at this age. I'm going to change. Come on, are you kidding me? Now again, not changing who I am, but changing my access to how things touch me. That's what we're talking about. Not changing who I am, but changing how close I am. Changing that chasima, changing that block that I put up years ago without even realizing it, where I stamped on myself. I put a stamp on myself at a certain age. I didn't even realize it, and I said, this is Shlomo. And, sorry, it's just not going to change. I mean, I might get into something a little bit, but, Not, it's not me to really be open enough to change who I am, to change core things about the way that I relate to the world. So that there's an Amalek energy there. Rabbi Shlomo said he once saw this when he was in someone's house, and this girl finally, after a long time, brought home a report card that was filled with A's. So the mother looked at it and said, listen, this means nothing. The fact that it happened this time, now it has to stay like this. Rabbi Shlomo said he smelled Amalek from that mother's mouth as she was saying that. Amalek was so alive in that house. Can't be that can't be that it's real. Lechol liot. Now, Rav Kook and the Ish Kodesh and the Tzaddikim are talking about, as a society, like individuals, we always have to work on that, but as a society, to be able to truly believe that the Israeli society doesn't have to be as disgusting as it's been during this election campaign, that it's possible to actually, go through a democratic, process without smelling such hatred. Yutzma pitom, en sikui, am kshe orif, stiff-necked people. We can't change those things. We can't change that. That's where the work really, really, really is. I've never met an older person that said, I believe I could change the world. I only meet young people that say, I could believe I could change the world. That's Amalek. That's Amalek. So anyway, let's go to the next paragraph. So now, let's go one step deeper. Everyone is asking, why does the Parsha of the Ten Commandments begin with the story of Yisro? So now, what Rabbi Shlomo is going to do is he's going to do something that he does quite often, but usually through a different conduit, through a different sinor. Usually Rabbi Shlomo ties us back to the beginning of the world, beginning of the Torah, by connecting every single story in the Torah to what? Tikkun Eitz Hadat, the fixing of the tree of knowledge. We've seen this almost every single parsha, that somehow the fixing of the tree of knowledge is brought up in regards to everything that we're learning in the whole Torah. But this time Rabbi Shlomo is touching on something that we could relate to a little bit more, because, what does that mean? I could have a lot of beautiful theories as to what this means to connect to the fixing of the tree of knowledge. But this concept that Rabbi Shlomo is going to bring us back to regarding the first parsha in the Torah touches home big time. Because sibling rivalry, which is something we've spoken about here, is one of the most painful things in the world. When siblings hate each other, when siblings don't talk to each other, and I don't know if anyone in this room suffers from this, and this is not a judgment call on anyone, it's just a learning a real learning of the Torah. The first time God really gets angry at someone, it's not Chava, it's not Adam and Chava. If you look at the Pshat and the Psukim, God asks them, what did you do? And they say what they say. And then he says, this means that you have to do this. This means this is going to be hard for you. And we already learned that the Ribono Shel Olam speaking to Adam and Eve after they ate and told them, you're going to have to go through this, and you're going to have to go through this. Rabbi Shlomo explained those weren't punishments. Those were just explaining the reality which they entered. We spoke about this many times. Now, what's the other thing that Rabbi Shlomo is going to be talking about tonight? Connecting us to, obviously, the first two brothers, Cain and Hevel, that when God gets angry, what does he say? What does he say to his brother? What does he say to Cain? No, that's what he says. That's what he says. But what does God say? Kol dmei achicha tzoakim al min ha'adama. There's saying your brother's blood is screaming out to me. Meaning God's response to Adam and Eve, not listening to him, right? Okay, you didn't listen to me exactly. But then his response to Cain killing his brother, even though God never told him, don't kill your brother, because probably God thought, did I create a world where I have to tell a brother, please don't kill your brother? And yet what happens with the first two brothers? So according to the Sifrei Hasidut and Kabbalah, and now we're going to get a little bit out there, but we touched upon it in the past, so I feel safe enough to speak about this in public, is that each of the characters in the Torah after Adam and Chava and Cain and Hevel are always Gilgulim. They're always reincarnations coming back, trying to fix what the initial problem was. Can you imagine trying to come back to fix the problem of a brother killing a brother? Now, in order to understand how can you fix such a horrible concept, you have to ask yourself not how could he murder, but what was the root? Where did it come from? How in the world did they reach a place that a brother can murder a brother? You know, Rabbi Shlomo always says, when we talk about, the Jewish establishment always talks about fixing things and trying to recreate a better world for the youth. Rabbi Shlomo always says, we're always talking about putting band-aids on little wounds on fingers. Rabbi Shlomo says, that's great, but what about a heart transplant? Because that's what's needed. So fixing Cain and Hevel is you have to go to the root of it. Not just make sure guns are off limits. Create a reality where guns aren't a reality. Don't create a reality where guns are off limits. Go much deeper. Create a reality where there's no need for a gun. Go to the root of the problem instead of dealing with nice, cute, chitzoni aspects of it, outer aspects of it. And here he's going to take us into the meat, into the heart of the problem which existed between Cain and Hevel, and how that connects to our Parsha, and how it connects to Aseret HaDibrot. Look what he does here. Everyone is asking again, why does the Parsha of the Ten Commandments begin with the story of Yisro? When we go back to the first family in the Torah, we saw the only two brothers who existed in the world, and they couldn't get it together. You see what it is? God, so to speak, could not come down to Mount Sinai and give us the Torah before they made peace with each other, before Cain and Hevel made peace with each other. What does that mean? They're dead. What's going on over here? So this Parsha begins by saying that Cain and Abel made peace. How so? Look in the text. According to our deepest Kabbalists, Yisro was the soul of Cain, and Moshe was the soul of Abel. Okay? According to the Arizal, I think it's the Arizal, Mamish, Yitro was the Gilgul of Cain, and Moshe was the Gilgul of Hevel. By the way, Stam, to throw it out there, does anyone know where else Hevel was incarnated before Moshe Rabbeinu? Noach, also, but he didn't fix it. He didn't do the job. Again, according to our deepest Kabbalists, Yisro was the soul of Cain and Moshe was the soul of Hevel. How did they fix each other? Now we're getting to the root of fixing the headquarters of hatred in the world, of jealousy. Remember, the first sin was the tree of knowledge. Did that involve anger, hatred, and jealousy? Not so much. It involved other things, but not so much the core things that you and I deal with on a daily basis. That's the second Aveira in the Torah. A brother killing a brother. So look what Rabbi Shlomo says. Do you know what it took out of Yisro to leave what he left and join Am Yisrael? He was established. He was the priest of the pagan world. Rashi says there's not one of Avodah Zarah that he didn't have a fun time with. He was like the Pope. And he's leaving everything behind him and coming to Moshe. Now, Chaver, just Reb Shlomo was saying, do you realize, you have to understand, what does that mean? That Yitro comes to Moshe, it's the biggest thing in the world. It's like, I always think of today, I remember, not to compare, but whatever, I already mentioned it. Last night I was watching the news and I was imagining that in the middle of an interview, Tzipi Livni turns to the interviewer and says, Ani Yudiya. I'm a Jew, yet there's Torah in the world. There's Eretz Yisrael, there's Avram Avinu. No, but could you imagine, like, if there was this absolute shift of consciousness where it completely, like, changed the way that, you know, that you sense something? Can you imagine it? If there was a complete shift in it, it would just be an incredible thing. Can you imagine if she'd say that? What would it do to the general public? I mean, imagine someone else, like imagine another world figure that they just had this, like, something dawned upon them and they stopped, they could care less what anyone thinks about them, and they're just like, wait a second, I'm being touched by the world, I'm being touched by what God is doing in front of me. Can you imagine that? What kind of shockwaves it would send to the whole world? So you have to understand, I gave you a stupid little example of Tzipi Livni. I mean, I always think that if Bibi just got up and started talking about Hashem, and didn't just say Bezrat Hashem around election times, he said it also when he's, only now they say Bezrat Hashem, all these people, right? But just imagine if like a big person, a big personality would have that awakening and not care what anyone thought, what that would do to the world, how much that would shake people up, especially a person of such influence like Yitro, who was the greatest Oved of Avodah Zarah in the world, the priest, Kohen Midian, the Kohen of the Midianites, whatever that exactly means. So Rabbi Shlomo says that's how the Parsha starts. Someone reaching way beyond himself. Because to not care what anyone thinks about you is not a simple thing. It's not a simple thing. You got to stretch yourself so deep, inside out, over. And you know, all the great people in the world, all the great people that have ever reached greatness and that have had to do something big and they knew it, they, at a certain point in their life, they had to do something and consciously not care what anyone thinks about what they're doing. Every person has to go through that period of time. There's no other way. Yitro reached it in our Parsha. Vayishma Yitro, coming to see Moshe Rabbeinu. I don't care. I don't care what anyone says. That's Yitro. Next paragraph. Now, how did Moshe reach beyond himself? Isn't it the biggest chutzpah in the world? Yisro is a Jew for one day, and he's already giving Moshe advice how to run the show, right? That's what happens in our parsha. He's a Jew for one day, and he already comes and starts saying, Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not, you're not doing it too good. Imagine someone would come to Israel, and the next day he'll go to the chief rabbi and say, listen, I don't really like the rabbinate, you have to do something else. I mean, he won't make it even to the steps, right? So Moshe could say to him, to Yitro, I'm talking to God all the time. Let's face it, you're a pagan, you're a Jew for just one day. Who are you to tell me anything? Can you imagine how much Moshe reached beyond himself? It takes a lot of beyond yourself to take advice from somebody else. Especially when you think that they have no religious right to tell you anything. I shared with you one time, that happened to me in a miftar. It's so weird because the guy that it happened with called me a few hours ago. I haven't talked to him in ages. Where he was a fresh Baal Tshuva, and we were both learning for Smicha together. He was from for a year or two. I'm from my whole life. They should have put a red carpet for me when I'm from my whole life, right? He comes to me and he, after davening one day, he's me'ir li a ha'ara. He made a comment to me about the way that I either said a bracha over something or some halachic comment. And I looked at him with that stupid Amalek smirk, I admit. And I kind of said, brother, maybe just keep on learning for a while until you're... And he looked at me. Now I'm feeling like... He looked at me like Hevel probably looked at Cain, he looked at me with such eyes of are you really saying what you're saying right now? Do you hear what you're saying? And then I realized by the nighttime what I said. And I cried, I was so broken, I couldn't believe that, I was like, here we are learning to become rabbis, And I could act like that. It was like such a moment. I'm very thankful. Such a pacho, such a zetz I got. It's really one of those moments. It's already like 12 years ago. But it's a moment that I remember feeling like mamish, a patch, a smack in my face. But being very thankful for that smack. Feeling very lucky that I realized that this stinks, that energy. Because like Rabbi Shlomo says, it takes a lot of beyond yourself to take advice from somebody else. That's true in general, right? Now Rabbi Shlomo says, do you know why parents never listen to children? Only he could say such a line like that. Right? What other Rebbe would ever say what other educator would ever say such a line like that? Do you know why parents never listen to children? He doesn't even have to answer that question. Huh? Well, why not? Why doesn't he have to answer that question? Because we don't live in a world that a child has something to tell me that could really help me, even though
That's what they do.
that's what they do all the time. But consciously, in a not beyond myself world, you kidding me? You can't, My child, no. The way it works here is that I tell you what to do. Now, we're not talking about child being chutzpah. Why don't you listen to your child when they told you to be quiet and leave them alone? That's not what we're saying. But when your child has an idea about how something should be or whatever it is, to be able to listen to them takes a lot of going beyond yourself. A lot, I'm sure some of you that have older kids have experienced this to a much greater detail than what I've been privileged so far, but you know what I'm saying. So look what he says here. So the beginning of the Parsha is that both Yisro and Moshe are reaching beyond themselves. Yisro by leaving all Avodah Zarah and not caring what anyone thinks, and Moshe Rabbeinu taking advice from someone who 36 hours prior was bowing down to idols. Moshe Rabbeinu. Nuts. This is what happens before we receive the Torah. And it's amazing. When did this when did this actually chronologically take place? The story of Yitro coming to Moshe Rabbeinu? Does anyone know? It happened after, the whole Rashi on this, it happens actually after Matan Torah. So why are you telling me it over here? Exactly. Because if you want to be receiving the Torah in a few minutes and think that you can get away with being Mekayiming and keeping the Torah without going beyond yourself, you missed the whole point. These two people and them reaching beyond themselves has to be put before you receive the Torah on Mount Sinai. But now to go deeper into the machloket between Cain and Hevel, we still have a few more minutes. Now, what was the duel between Cain and Abel really all about? Cain was angry at Abel. Abel brings the sacrifices and God accepts it. That means that Abel really knew how to serve God. Right? If Hashem accepts your korban, that's a siman that you know how to do it. You got it down. So the question is, why didn't you teach me? This is what Cain is saying to Hevel. You see that God's not answering me and He's answering you. Why didn't you teach me? You saw that I also want to do something, but I didn't know how to do it. How do you walk away without teaching me? That was Cain's claim on Hevel. Now, what was wrong with Cain? He should have said, Master of the world, I really don't know how to do it, but I'm so glad I have a brother who knows how to. Right? That would have been the tikkun back then. If Cain really wanted to serve God, he should have said, God, I'm so glad I have a brother who really knows how to do it. And there is something wrong with Hevel also, Rabbi Shlomo says. He doesn't get off the hook either. It was Cain's idea to bring a sacrifice, not Hevel's. Did you know that? Because how do we know that? Based on the order. Cain brings it, it's not accepted. Hevel brings it, it's accepted. Why didn't you thank Cain for the idea? Why didn't you acknowledge, this is Rabbi Shlomo saying to Hevel, why didn't you acknowledge that Cain knows something which you didn't know? Remember that last line. Why didn't you acknowledge that Cain, now who's Cain? Who's the Gilgul of Cain? Why didn't you acknowledge that Yitro knows something which you, Moshe, didn't know? Boom. That's what happens in our Parsha. There's an acceptance of Cain teaching Hevel again. Of Cain, yeah. It's an amazing thing. Now listen to this unbelievable fixing. The fixing is that Yisro, who is the Gilgul of Cain, comes to Moshe, who's the Gilgul of Hevel, and he's begging him, teach me, right? It starts off like that. The first day he comes and he sits with Moshe Rabbeinu, it says they sat down, there was a whole Seudah, and what is Yitro basically telling Moshe Rabbeinu? Please teach me how to bring a korban to God. And the next day, Yitro comes to Moshe and he says, listen, you're doing the whole judging thing wrong. I'll teach you how to do it. Cain is teaching Yitro. Cain is teaching Hevel. And the day before, Hevel is teaching Cain. And there's this thankfulness as opposed to jealousy that, hey, you have something I don't have. Would you mind teaching it to me? Hey, you have something I don't have. Would you mind teaching it to me? As opposed to the way that our world works is, they have, look what they have. Lama lo magia li? How come I don't deserve it? Like the way that Moshe Rabbeinu and Yitro are handling what they're lacking, that they're open enough to ask each other to mashlim, to complete something that the other person doesn't have, is mamish a tikkun of Sefer Beresh, of Parshat Bereshit, of the first two brothers who couldn't get it together in this world. So here Rabbi Shlomo says, so you see what it is, bottom over here. These two neshamas, these two souls, these two brothers finally reached beyond themselves. You know why? Because the way that paragraph before of Cain and Hevel not teaching each other, it would reach beyond themselves for Cain to say, I'm so happy, God, that you accepted my brother's korban, right? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine two brothers, they're both in the same business, and one brother is not doing so good, and the other brother is doing good? Can you imagine the brother that's not doing good standing before God and saying, I'm so happy that my brother is doing good, and really mean it? You know, it's the big stuff that we're talking about. This is what it boils down to. To reach beyond yourself. And only then do we taste what living with God's word is all about. What living with the Torah is all about. See what the danger was, I think, in the order of the Parsha? Is that if we just crossed the Red Sea, and we right away went to go get a Torah, and it would have still been the most powerful experience in the world. For them at that moment, hearing God's voice, the most incredibly powerful thing in the world. Seeing the Ribono Shleim on Har Sinai. But however, for us today, in today's day and age, we need that middle of Yitro hearing something, hearing about people that change, and hearing about people that don't change, and saying, I'm making a conscious decision to connect to people that change. Moshe sees that Yitro, the king of Avodah Zarah, chooses to be with people that change, and he allows that person to also change something about him. And there is so much openness to change taking place between crossing the Red, between leaving Egypt and receiving the Torah, because God took us out of Egypt to constantly always change. To constantly always go through the circles. Remember, the first thing God tells us on Mount Sinai is, remember me? I took you out of Egypt. And Rabbi Shlomo says, that's a reminder. He's saying, remember me, meaning, Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Tzaticha Me'et Mitzrayim Beit Eladim. It's basically a reminder saying, whenever you receive the Torah, when you hear the Aseret HaDibrot, whenever you do a mitzvah, God is reminding, what is everything Zeichel Yetziat Mitzrayim? Kiddush, we say it all the time in davening. Why is everything always a Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim? Because God wants us to never, ever, ever forget that we were once capable of changing. That we were slaves, that we were capable of changing, becoming free people to receive His Torah. And in this teaching of showing how Cain and Hevel are the Gilgulim of Yitro and Moshe, which is just a far out, insane, and it's just a crazy, crazy, crazy combination of characters you have here. None of us are here for the first time. You know that, right? Now we're going to get really... Right? We can end, it's okay. But, none of us are here for the first time. You know what I mean, right? Mm-hmm. Like Rabbi Shlomo once said, I remember I was once listening to him give a shiur in 1979 in 1977, January 1977 in Yerushalayim. And he starts off by saying, friends, we're always in the middle. And someone said, what? He said, well, two reasons. One is that none of us are here for the first time. And everyone, where he was talking to, were like, oh yeah, of course, we know what you mean, right? But then he said, none of us we're always in the middle because yesterday, we were once born and one day we'll not be here anymore. So we're always in the middle. When you're at the end, you can't change anymore. And the people that can't change, people that are walking around living dead lives, untouched by what God does all day long. Rav Kook writes in Orata Tshuva that the leshed achayim, the richness of life, to taste how much life has to offer you, is tshuva. You were there yet? No, you weren't there yesterday, right? Very important shiur. I didn't send it out yet. It's a very important shiur. We ended the 5th parak with that. To taste the what does it mean to taste the richness of life? To be touched by everyone you come in contact with. We're not just talking about tasting the richness of life as if you're able to go to Niagara Falls, then you could taste the richness of life. The ability to be touched and moved and changed is constant. It's also what the holiday of Tu B'Shvat is all about in a nutshell, but it's not for now. It actually is for now, it's just there's no more time. You see what I'm saying? So alavai, we should understand that the hakdama, the introduction to receiving the Torah, is not how well can you keep these laws, is how much can you constantly remember that you're always able to go beyond yourself. And then you can receive the Torah. Then you receive the Torah. It's such an important thing to remember in a really profound, profound way. The truth is, this kind of a shiur should be followed with an hour of sichat chaverim, how do we say sichat chaverim? A real deep conversation with friends. I'm begging you, a night like tonight, I'm begging you to please take one person in this shiur, or go home and take this teaching to your spouse, or a friend, or whoever it is, and ask each other, do you think you're capable of going beyond yourself? Do you think I'm capable of going beyond myself? To always, let's take this and push ourselves without fear. The answer might be no, that's okay, but meaning I think the answer will always be yes. However, let's get ready to hear the Aseret Dibrot this Shabbos, and not just get there and hear the same words, but listen to Rishon, Sheni, and Shlishi, and remember, oh yeah, there were two people that mamash reached beyond themselves, and then the Torah lets us know there's a concept called Aseret Dibros. And I really believe, with all my heart and soul, that what's left now to do in the world is not, like Rabbi Shlomo said, there used to be a movement that was like pushed you to reach your potential. He said, Yiddishkeit's not reaching your potential. That's a pagan concept. Yiddishkeit is a reaching beyond your potential movement. It's whatever you think your potential is. I could never be happy for my brother if I don't have what he has. Shock yourself. Just shock yourself. Really surprise yourself. Because that's the only way that things get really, exciting. And life has richness like that. And it's a rich, rich, rich world when you're like Shlomo Katz and not like Bob Dylan. We'll see you all next week. Visit Hashem. There won't be shiurim here after next week for a few weeks, but we have next week here, and this Thursday night, if you're going to be in Efrat at 7 p.m. in Lev Efrat, in the shul, in the Shchuna Lev Efrat, which is in the Teina, at 7 p.m., one of the holiest nights of the year, is our friend Shira Pransky's Yortzeit. So 60 Yortzeit. So that's very important if you can make it at 7 p.m. this Thursday night. Lev Efrat, if anyone has any questions about it, you can email me and I'll send you some words, some directions or whatever the shul is. And then next week will be Monday night back here. And possibly Sunday night. I have to reschedule yesterday's Shir in Simchat Shlomo, possibly Sunday night in Simchat Shlomo, the last session on Tefillah. And then all the Chutz La'aretz stuff I'll put out later in the week. Make sure all your friends come and learn with us in Chutz La'aretz. All right? Thank you so much. I'll be in LA, in Chicago, in New York. I'll write the whole thing.